Hi there, class. So this week, we're only going to go over one chapter, and it's designing organizations for performance excellence. This will be a little bit on the organizational theory element of it because the important thing to understand is that there's not a templated way. One of the things we talked about in the beginning was the fact that Coke and Pepsi are two very successful companies, yet everything about them and how they're run is very different. It kind of showed that there really is no one best way. Different ways to get the job done. They have different approaches. They have different structures. They have different cultures. But nevertheless, no one would deny both are enormously successful. Some of the things that affect the work organization, of course, first of all, how there's a degree of what they call mechanistic, which is very formal. A lot of bureaucracy, and I don't mean from the negative standpoint, just the way things are done. And so another is called organic, or some people say organistic, and it's more or less laissez-faire. There's not the rigid boundaries. In truth, there's those extremes, and there's a lot kind of in the middle. But it depends on the organization. It's not enough to say one is good, one is bad. The military, for instance, is very mechanistic, and it's very successful. It really has to be for that type of an organization to be efficient in order to do its job. Other things, especially when there's a lot of innovation, you have companies like, we'll talk a lot about Gore, W.L. Gore Company, which uses a matrix structure. And the idea is to be pliable. So you have that. You have the management styles themselves. And they're kind of like leadership styles, but a little bit different. And I'm going to talk a bit in class about how not only your parents, if you have a brother or sister, manage you differently, but you manage your parents differently. I doubt any of you manage your mother the same way you manage your father. There's the customer influence themselves. For instance, governmental agencies have certain requirements and inspections and things like that where non-governmental agencies might not. There's also companies, how many different products they have. You know, it's one thing really when you think about it, Apple doesn't have a huge line of products. You compare that. I mean, they have, we all know the iPad, the iPhone, the computers and so forth. But you look at Samsung. Samsung is in different industries. They sell appliances. They sell airplane stuff. They sell obviously all the the gadgets, the pads, the phones and stereos and TVs, and that's a huge difference in the complexity of the lines that they carry compared to Apple, which is a strength of Apple because again, all that we talked about how they bundle their things so well. Obviously, the financial stability of a company obviously makes sense. It makes a lot of do it well. We're going to kind of go into these things. Now, traditionally, we talk about the org chart. I call it the food chain. You know, the one sits on top and then people below them. And basically, it's kind of like the food chain as far as that goes. Who has the power, who has the authority. And this is not a bad thing. But it's very good for administrative purposes. But it's not necessarily good for total quality. This is a big problem, in fact, where it creates, these things can blind organizations to problems and with ways for improvement because everything gets so siloed out that myopia can occur. Other problems with a formal structure, and that's kind of like what we talk about traditional structure, is that one of the big problems is it separates employees from customers. And what I mean by that is, you have end users, the only people who deal with the end users. The only people would be, for instance, the sellers. But they tend to be very logged in to what they do. And they forget, remember in the diagram we showed how like those who mine ore, and then they have the steel mill, and they are both a customer and supplier. And then they would sell it to the auto parts place, and the customer and supplier. So we see these types of relationships, and the functional zones work the same way within an organization. You have if R&D isn't talking to marketing, there's a problem. If marketing is not talking to sales, and they're not talking, I mean, this is a group effort. There's a lot of interlocking areas that if they're not doing that, then they're going to have problems, especially if there's another company that does. Because it's all about competition. There's an old saying that says, so there's two guys are running away because this bear is chasing him. And the one guy looks at the other and goes, "We can't outrun a bear. Are you crazy?" He goes, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just got to be faster than you." And that's the way a lot of the competition is. You just got to be better than your competitor. These types of things also these rich structures can be inhibitive to process improvement. The only time you see a lot of companies, process improvement within the function. But unfortunately, a lot of the good process improvements are cross-functional. So these are some of the things that could be guideposts, or not guideposts, they're blocks because of the organizational chart itself. And also, one other problem is there's a lot of companies that have a quality department. The problem with that is, as we've talked about in class, whose job is quality? Everybody's. So it tends to be well, that's not my job. The quality people take care of that. They're the ones that are going to look into that instead of the people who are actually probably closest to a problem. So oftentimes companies have to redesign their organizations just to improve the performance. So again, you have and remember we talked about not focusing on, for instance, metrics, but on processes. Remember we had the weight example where how do you know if a diet's working? By the measurements. And we use the example of Dr. J, Dr. K in class, and I use it in another video, where the idea is that we can get so in tune to metrics that we're missing the fact that those are guideposts to let us know how well the processes are functioning. If they're not functioning well, then we need to adjust the processes. We talked in class a lot about the fact that you've got companies that will have metrics which can lead to agency theory, which can be a very bad thing, but they're not looking at the processes that generate it. So you're actually incentivizing a lot of people to cheat and be actually unethical many times. You do want to create a team-based environment. Now, on the website, I put in, I think it's called Apple Culture. It's a video on week 5 this week. And I recommend you look at it because it says a few different things. It talks about the Apple's organizational culture, which is interesting because as they talk about it, you can see how the structure really works. They work in small teams, but that's an Apple's fort, but they work cross-functionally. It isn't static. And you really get a good sense of why, when you get done watching the video, you're going to understand why so many companies have trouble emulating Apple, because they are an innovative company from top to bottom, from their culture, from their organizational design on down the road. I mean, everything works for that. Whenever you can. In fact, some companies become so formal. Xerox got a lot more profitable after it got rid of 7 layers of management. I mean, it really was so formal that it just became redundant, and it slowed down communication. So and there's companies that have gotten rid of more layers than that. Idea is to get down to maybe 4 or 5 levels maximum. That's probably what most companies need. No company, I don't know a company that needs 12 layers of management, but there are some that have that. Home Depot used to have, it was interesting. You had this, the department manager, system manager, store manager at a store. Then you had district managers that took care of a district. Then you had regional managers that would be, say, the Northwest region, the Southwest region. And they'd have, these were presidents. Presidents of, say, and these regions would go into, they had 7 different divisions. So you had 7 people for the whole company that were division managers. And then they put a layer in of, I'm not even trying to remember what the name was, but there was 7 answered to 4 who answered to the 2 CEOs. And eventually the company said, look, why do we have these 4? We got 7. It's not that hard to manage 7 divisions. Why don't we get rid of these other 4? Now they were very expensive. They all had their own plane. They made a lot of money in stock and so forth. It was an expensive endeavor, but also it really bogged down to communication. It's not that they were bad, but why talk to someone when you don't have to? I mean, really, the communication should have been more direct. And eventually, they got rid of that. I'm trying to think of what the name of the position was, but there was 7 that answered to 4, they answered to 2. So that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And the idea is that you want to be able to create an organization that's more agile, that's more flexible. That's what Xerox noticed when it got rid of a lot of layers of management, was that, wow, we can adapt quicker. We can respond quicker. They were like 80% market share, and then they went down to 13. And by becoming a more agile organization, they were able to increase their market share again. They had all the potential. They had more products, more patents. They were quite innovative on that and the technical aspect. They did a horrible job integrating it throughout the company. So they got rid of a lot of middle management. And it's not that middle management is bad, but if you have redundancy, it's not doing you any good. So you can see how this would affect quality, because decision making needs to be closer down the road, as far as down the organizational chart. You can't have people at the vice president levels making decisions that should be made at the lower levels. They have their own decisions to make. But I had a manager. One of the common things in retail, for instance, is that someone who's a good worker and he's a good assistant manager, and then become a manager or a department manager or things like that. And the problem is, a lot of times they're the really best workers and they're really good at it. The problem is that now they can't get their jobs done. They have a new job now. You're a manager. And I remember talking to one manager, and she was a great worker, but she wasn't getting her stuff done. And I remember having to talk to her and say, okay, Joanne, and one of the things, price changes. I said, she was doing price changes. I said, Joanne, who can do price changes in your department? She said, anyone. I go, well, then get anyone to do it. What about the labeling? Who can do that? She says, well, anyone. Well, then get anyone to do it. What about schedules? She goes, well, I do that. Well, then you should do your schedules, because you're falling behind the schedules because you're doing work that other people should be doing. That's very, very common, especially if they're good at their job. So they move up and they've got to let go of a lot of the things that they were good at, and they have to manage those below them and develop them so they can be as good as they were. And by lowering these things, the companies can become more agile, and they can do a better job redesigning the whole system. If they have a lot of layers of management to it, they're not going to be able to do it. Now, there's a few things as far as the types of processes. The value creation processes are by far the most important to the business. They're the ones creating value for the company. They're creating value for the customer. So the two goals are mutually are the same. So there's a lot of it in the design process. Design is not just one process. It's all the activities as far as developing the product. From the actual design of the product to the design of every element along the line. That takes planning, that takes good work, that takes wisdom. If you don't do it right now, and that's another problem that happens when people move up, they don't want to spend the time to organize it and plan correctly. They just want to, let's get it done, let's get it done, let's get it done. Well, if you don't plan it right, you're going to get some things done and maybe not the important things done. And that's, the urgent versus the important. So again, that part's very important. That's why we have processes for it. The support processes are the non-value added processes in the sense that they don't add value to the product themselves. You got human resources, things like that. It's not that they're bad. You need them, but they don't add the value to the processes. One of the things I talked about earlier is like the quality. Everybody should be involved in making quality decisions about quality. All people should be managing quality. In fact, I know Deming recommended just getting rid of the quality department, because if you do that, you're in a sense giving that job to someone else, and it should be everyone's job. And every level can make a significant difference. They gave a great example. I think it's called the Texas Nameplate Company, and not a very big company, but they're very agile. They're able to adapt quicker than everyone, and it has allowed them competitive advantage and allowed them to grow their company, because nobody's as agile as they are. The element of putting the external customer first is also interesting, because it's how it's gone about. I showed you the Home Depot pyramid from 1979 to 1999, and it was the idea of the CEO on the bottom, and and this is a company that this wasn't a marketing thing. They truly believed Bernie Marcus, CEO of Home Depot, said, Dave, they're not shopping here because I'm the CEO. They're going to shop here whether or not you take care of the customer or you don't. If you don't take care of the customer, they're not going to shop here. If you take care of the customer, they're going to shop here. So Home Depot always had this emphasis on taking care of the employees. The new management, after that, put the customers on top. Well, the problem was it was really more of a marketing tool. But the thing is, how do you put the customers on top? What is missing from that is the fact that customers are an invaluable source of information. The organization, as far as its activities, needs to put the employees first because they are the ones who take care of the customers. If you want to take care of your customers, you take care of your employees. That's the gist of it. If you don't take care of your employees, especially the ones that are interfacing with the customers, you can't say I'm taking care of the customers. It's antithetical to everything that you say. So very important and especially when it comes to the design of that. We want to make sure that we look at this chain of customers concept. Remember we talked about, for instance, sales, like this is the internal part. Sales is the customer of marketing. Who is the customer? And marketing is the customer of research and development. Research and development is the customer of product design. Product design is the customer of manufacturing. Manufacturing is the customer of sales. And again, who's the customer? The end user. So we can see how these things are connected. And this is why making sure that in the organizational design element of it, these things stay as I just mentioned. If not, they get siloed and they don't communicate and no one's winning. Customer's not winning. There's no good cross company or processes, and the company becomes static. Let me do it for time. Good. Idea again, you want to create a team-based organization. It's interesting because one of the things that Gore does, and the other ones that make Gore-Tex, they have a true matrix company. A lot of people, this is not for everybody. It's not that it's hard, but you work in teams. And I'm just going to give an example. You have 8 people in a team, and they might be working on 8 projects, and each one is kind of the project lead, and everybody works. So, person 1, everybody works for person 1 on this project, but everybody works for person 2 on another. And the idea is to use everybody's strengths on these projects and to be able to use their communication within the group. What makes it difficult for people is how they do evaluations. At the end of the year, everybody has to grade everybody. You're graded, it's peer reviewed, and you have to be ranked. A lot of people especially foreign nationals, very uncomfortable with that. They're very uncomfortable with having to rank each other. And then they get out for comments and so forth. But it is enabled to be very mobile, very nimble. They have other things with regard to their compensation they do. It's very progressive. And that's why they're a very good company to work for, and they're highly profitable and successful. Getting near my 20-minute mark, so I just want to, actually at this point I'm just going to go over the discussion questions. The first one, what are the core processes? And the whole idea is I want you to break them down. What are the core processes in a video rental store? Give me that. Say the core processes of a video store and list them out. Core processes of a department store, core processes of a grocery store. And if, in a sense, what I'm looking for is, if you were going to redesign it, how would you do it? So I'm looking for suggestions here. Have fun with it. Just have fun with it. You might not cite anything on this one. That's fine. That's fine. I just want you to, don't give me a couple of lines. This thing should probably have about 4 or 5 paragraphs. But have fun with it. Come up with, answer those questions and see what you come up with. Second discussion question is, find an organization chart for a college or university. It could be any college, any university. And, the org chart, given the food chain, you want to ask 2 things. Is it functional or process focused? What advantages do you see? And, what would you change? So again, you need to cite what the university is. Tell me university, and you can need to cite that. That's fine. But tell me how you would change that. Because these are real life examples that you might be in. A lot of the classes I teach business strategy and so forth. You know, it's really geared very high end just for CEOs, presidents, things like that. There's a lot of that. These are actually things that you might be making a judgment at, recognizing that as companies change, they may have to change the processes as well, especially as they go from small to medium to large. So have fun with that one. The third one is how to team support structure for organizational design. Pretty much a textbook answer. I want you to find that. Make sure you reference it and cite it. Remember, every citation has to correspond with reference. Every reference has to correspond with a citation. Now, the assignment has to do with modern ad agency. It reminds me of the first one because it really talks about, there's a scenario. These are real scenarios. And what went wrong? I mean, really is what it comes down to. What went wrong? What mistakes, it says here, what mistake did Newberg and the steering committee make? The initial development, so you're going to go through that. What were the early indications the system was not working as planned? And what steps should be taken to revise and implement? So use the template. Use the template. Keep running ahead the way it is. Make your life easier. I provide templates. Use them. Can't stress that enough. When the first section, though, remember, your audience is someone who's smart. It's like I say, it's like your roommate. Smart, intelligent, but has no idea about the case study. So you, in your own words, say what's going on with the case study. Describe it. That's the first section. Cite the author of the textbook, because that's where you got the information. I think it's Evans, 2013 or 14. So you cite that person, because that's where you got it. You want to cite statistics every single time. Anytime you stats, you got to cite it. And cite where you got it. That's what you need to do. Otherwise, it reads like just your opinion. And like I've said, like in the very first video, is the fact that no one cares what you think. That's the idea. You're a master student. So this is a kind of a beginning research degree. So you'll be able to assess. You don't use the first person. You're giving a report at this point. But you need to be as objective as possible. And cite and reference, and don't give your opinion, and don't make it sound like it's your opinion, because you're not an expert. It sounds really harsh, I know that, but really that's the way that works. So that's all I got this week. Let's have